Hello there, Bravehearts, Urbanites, and Coach Mad Hatters. Welcome to my day. It is Friday, June 26th, 2020. Time is it? At 10:46 a.m. Eastern. This might be a long one. It might be a long one. So, now would be a good time for you to either sign on or sign off. Um, but even though you have the you have the prerogative to pause or come back to however your heart desires. But this is going to be a long one. Now, interestingly enough, this is not part three of the keynotes to self. For some reason, I am in deep contemplation about part three. And I have a clue as to why. And I'll unfold all of that in the actual session. Um, but this session I have entitled Mercury Retrograde Reminders. Um, and they're mainly my personal reminders, but I had the notion to get up here and share. So that's what we're going to do. But um, it's going to be incorporated with, of course, I threw some cards out and I've meditated. But the meditation was not for this session. Um, this bundle of information I was using for the prep of a lecture that I'll be probably unfolding as the closer it gets to autumn. Autumn is one of my favorite seasons, especially as a Virgo moon and Virgo ascending or ascended. Um, but while Mercury is in its R and R state, which is, now that I think about it, let me remind you that there are a series of announcements that will be hosted after the recording. So please stay tuned as the credits roll to find out what's going on, especially in the clubhouse of Coach Mad Hatters. Um, but I got the urge. I got the urge to unpack some things as it relates to my mercurial influences. And so, inside of the language of tarot, it is mainly the Hermit card that has brought the power of definition into my spaces, the power to define. I've been sitting in various conversations where this particular word, and it's still a fairly new word to me, this is the word esprit de corps, which is a feeling of pride, fellowship, and common loyalty shared by the members of a particular group. Now, the term came to me through a study session with my great uncle Gilbert's published memories. And I've spoken of this piece many times as one of my family heirlooms. And I put emphasis on my because to the remarkable astonishment of how we can have authors, published authors inside of the family circle that does not get its proper celebratory energy sometimes baffles me. And I didn't find out about this piece until a few years after my great uncle Gil had transitioned, transcended. And as I've said often, I'm a Capricorn sun. So was he. So the cardinal energy that is depicted inside of these pages has honestly served as a golden compass for me in some of my most darkest moments. It shined all sorts of support and optimism and honestly a beacon of light towards the things that I knew inside my heart I honestly needed to accomplish. And not just for self satisfaction, but for the history books, for, oh, there's a bird outside the window. Hee hee, look at that. Um, for understanding where I fit in. And I was going to throw out cards, but I'm going to see. Maybe I'll hold it for the closing of this session. So we are going to focus inside of uh, Mercury's R&R moments, which is Mercury retrogrades June 18th through July 12th. During this time, I have decided that I am going to hone into my review of certain things to honestly give um, understanding to, or honestly seek proper comprehension around what it is that I think I know, especially um, that which is linked to what I'm hoping will steadily move me forward. So one of the classic catchphrases of this moment will be esprit de corps. Esprit de corps. So inside of Uncle Gil's memoirs, he has a list of 18 priorities that, and as I read passages out of this piece, you'll understand a little more um, what it means. But number 6 on the list is to develop esprit de corps, which means to develop the feeling of pride, fellowship, and common loyalty shared by the members of a particular group. My particular groups is the Bravehearts, the Urbanites, and the Coach Mad Hatters. All are considered underdogs within this hyper concentration of industrious form in the societal classifications of America's human beings. To be an American is a hue to the being. It's a fashion perspective. Now, even within that is an entire spectrum of characteristics and comprehensions around what is good, right, righteous. But even in that, it's subjective because those that I would consider bravehearts or urbanites or coach mad hatters are those that are in the trenches, those at the bottom of the totem pole, those that privileged folk know nothing about. They don't know nothing about that life. And yet, conversations are still taking place inside the context of resources being divvied out by a higher sense of creed and classification. So the Braveheart, the Urbanite, and the Coach Mad Hatter must find a sense of pride and fellowship so that they may share this common loyalty inside of the affinity and affirmations that will preserve and reserve their sense of livelihood and censorship. So during Mercury retrograde, I think that it would do us some good. Us meaning the Braveheart, the Urbanite, and the Coach Mad Hatter would do us some good to understand where we stand, to grab hold of the sturdy comprehension of the concept around me and mine. Many folk talk a good game about how we're all in this together, and rightfully so. But we still seem to be gazing over the fact that there are levels to this shit. There are tiers to access and opportunity. There's this thing that is now being trendy to speak of when there's never been a secret around what actually matters, around who actually matters. And one of the things that I had been toggling with over the last 48 hours or so is uh, this hood analogy. So it goes like this. Say you had a guy friend that you had dealings with, maybe even romped around with and explored a little bit of romance or sensuality with. And as time unfolded, you all, the both of you, realized that he wasn't particularly in it in his authentic form, that there were many shades of gray to his presence, and that it started to become painfully obvious that he only wanted you around when it was beneficial for him. And so one day you all are sitting in a coffee shop and you are completely energetically linked to this acquaintance, but you are aching because you find out that he is not. And he isn't being apologetic about it. He feels no remorse about the part that he's played in your heartbreak. And yet you sit at this table and look him in his eye and tell him, I matter. Like you honestly need to understand the jewel that you have in front of you. I matter. And he's sitting there smug, and all of that he does when you aren't around signifies that in his world you absolutely do not matter. So how do you convince him that you matter in his world, the way he see things, the way he do things, amongst those he do it with? How do you convince him, as if you should even have to convince him that you matter? Because honestly, when shit matters, there is no convincing needed. You don't even have to talk about it. So, are you going to continue to show up to that fucking coffee shop where you have to pay for the coffee? You have to pay for the presents. You have to pay for his presents and constantly keep telling him how much he ought to be taken into consideration of how much you matter, when there are those that would give their everything to be in your presence? Well, you don't have to tell them that you matter. You literally can feel it in their energy. You can tell by the tone of the voice they use and the choice of the words. There will be no question about how much you matter. So when you do show up and you bring your part to the table, they also equally show up in respectful reciprocity and bring theirs to the table. That when you look them in their eyes, you know for a fact that you matter. You don't have to wear no t-shirts. You don't have to be stomping around town like, so in this pile of information that I have patched together, we are going to sit with Mercury, which is the celestial archetype of communication, honest, authentic, true communication. And we're going to hash things out. We're going to tap into that which honestly matters. So when you do find yourself at the coffee table again, the conversation will be so abundant with respect that it'll be a natural given that everybody at the table matters, that we can leave and graduate from the fundamentals that should already be generationally apparent. Because right now, the way things are unfolding, we are literally stomping around town trying to beg the dude that don't give a fuck about us that we matter. For centuries, we've been doing this shit. And for centuries, he's been shaking his ass and saying, uh, do you really? Do you really? So, I'm going to lead this conversation with saying, these are my feelings. What we're about to unhash or unpack or unleash is all me. So, from me to you, this is from a book from, Ayana Van Zant. And inside, um, and it's quite interesting because right at the moment, the title of the book is escaping me. Um, but once again, as always, I will handle my books until they begin to fall apart. Speaking of which, we have to remember where we are and what it is that we are being asked to tussle with. I'm going to link inside the notes for this segment a segment of a conversation about the archetypal psychology around Saturn. And as with every and anything that permeates inside of this realm, there is a feminine side and a masculine side. There is a light side, meaning external, and a dark side, meaning internal. There is a side to feelings and a side to, there is on one side of the spectrum, your our feelings, our emotions, our intuitive values, and on the other side of the spectrum is our thoughts, our logic, our scientific. Right in the middle is the meridian of balance, is the spine of the energetic value that will most often help us make sense of this shit because it is complicated. And please forgive me if at any point in this I tend to speak as if it is simple as flipping a switch. I mean, and for some it might be because some have been studying in terms of reversing generational curses. They've been studying and sifting through avalanches of content and context for years, even so much so to the point where they've picked up the baton from family members who have spent their entire lives trying to unlock and decipher how is it that a society could literally begin its birthing station inside of that which they have cleaned up and now call it colonization when actuality it was fucking theft. It was, this is, a I know this your house, but I want your house. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna act like I'm your friend. I'm gonna have you invite me to dinner. And once I'm across the threshold, I'm gonna slaughter all of y'all. I'm going to burn you in the backyard. And I'm gonna sit at your table and eat your food. And I'm gonna call it mine. And then I'm gonna invite all my other friends over and I'm gonna give them the instructions on how I did it to you so that they can go. And then I'm going to provide them with the funds and the endorsements to go around the neighboring towns and do the same fucking thing I did. So, and we're going to burn the books. We're going to burn all records of. We are going to make sure that whoever we decide is worthy of living, then we are going to make sure that they do not have access to the new knowledge, to whatever it is we create and compose post us being invited in. We're going to actually outlaw their ability to read or write or contribute to the intellectual collective of this society gonna be outlawed. For generations, it's gonna be outlawed. So by the time our descendants begin to start running things, they are going to be so detached from what actually happened that they are honestly going to speak as if they ought to be handled with a gentle, gracious, ameliorate. That is another word that I've been studying, and and I think I might have mentioned this before. I have begun um, creating a oracle deck that surrounds what I like to call the real Justice League. And Amelia Wright is one of the uh, core energies in the deck. And when the card comes up, that whomever is the recipient of the reading, they are to meditate on that particular energy for um, 30 consecutive days. I may pull one for this moment in time, honestly, because we are still far removed from remedy and that which is being attempted uh, to be reconciled. And what's interesting is that nothing is going to be reconciled if we do not usher in an enormous amount of respect for those that previously didn't matter. Because I have yet to tap into the perceptions and the provocations of the dude who sits on the other side of the coffee table who honestly don't give a fuck. While we are looking him in his eyes, trying to convince him that we matter, and just for the sake of not fueling fire, he will sit there and allow us to plead our case and say how much we matter when, in truth and honesty, the back of his mind, he is honestly watching and saying, I'm going to allow you to have your moment to swear to me how much you matter when the fact of the matter is you honestly don't. And I've proven that to you time and time and time again. I won't even sit at the table and speak with regards to honest interest. I'm going to refer to historical folks that propped up and perpetuate the inequality and the lopsided ass notions that so inside this book I dated this um, this page, which is for January 6th. I um, I dated it because I came across it February 17th, 2013. And I'm going to read it. Um, and let me just make mention, like, this is the second time I've attempted to record this. And I kept saying to myself, I really want to record it when I am in a more lighty, more upbeat energy. And the response came through that said, if you wait till then it will not be about Mercury retrograde, nor will it be in line and in step with the energies that you are honestly in present dealing with. And that everything can't be presented in this ultra optimism when we honestly have to face and reconcile some of this weighty shit. It is not going to be magically whisked away. And that as much as we would love to begin focusing on a time when there will be no more hard feelings or quote unquote bad attitudes, the liminal spaces to get to that is now. We are now betwixt between what was and what's about to be. And so the present, the gift, is this very moment. And you must honestly reflect that which is upon you. So here's the passage from January 6th. I think I'll link the book because I know it when and as a matter of fact, it's in one of my favorites inside of my Amazon account. So I will link the book details so you'll have it. As well as I was saying before I begin to digress, um, there's a talk. There's a talk um, that was facilitated by Jessica. Ah, come on. Hang on, and it's interesting too because I'm not sure if along the well, it had to be somewhere. However, I don't know people's lives, but back in 2014, her name was different than what it is today. So I'm gonna say last name is Diruzza. But back then, when she did her talk on Saturn and Neptune, it was, and I wrote it down, but I don't know where it is right now. I'm honestly becoming buried. I'm being buried in notes and my time. And that's interesting how I'm looking for something and my finger hits Yeah, it shut it off. So I had to take a moment and not necessarily to shift the energies, but to at least get a handle on the anchoring, the recenter, to recenter myself. So, um, in conjunction with um, the rolling motions inside of my maturity continuum around my hypothesis and my applications and the variables, as well as my purpose discovery portals, we are going to get through this, and we're gonna hash this out, and we're going to find ourselves inside of those spaces that allow for the true healing to come in through um, honest comprehension of the way things are defined. The power to define is what our society for generations have been using as an apparatus of measurement, especially around axiology, around that which is valuable to the individual as well as the collective. And so, the way that the American dream has been designed and fabricated, even, has done good for some and been detrimental for many. So, as I was saying, so Jessica facilitated this conversation around Saturn and Neptune. And she honestly gave insight to the divine um, feminine aspect of Saturn. And I've been saying for a while, and it had been quite baffling at how many uh, instances where Saturn is reflected in this hardcore masculine hue, view, and very little is devoted to this aspect of Saturn. Saturn is feminine energy. It is dark, feminine energy. It is Big Mama. It's the Great Mother. It is the chaotic emotions that are often suppressed inside of the original story of America's birth and maturity. And even to this very day, the suppression of emotions with regards to decision making or policy preservation is right in our faces. And because we are habitually inclined to not focus on the emotional side of life, to suppress that which is divinely feminine, we suffer. We suffer a lot, and we will continue to suffer as long as we be dismissive of this primal, chaotic force that is now on our heels, in our faces, permeating out of our pores. the traumatic stance of a suppressed, emotive existence will continue to produce those that figure like they have to sit at that coffee table and swear to old boy how much we matter. Ah, okay. Infinity. You can see it because I'm still right. We're still in drafting mode with them, but infinity. So that's good. Let me see if one more will come out, and then we'll go ahead on and get this conversation like truly started. Um, uh-huh. Destiny. So, infinity and destiny. Yeah, I'm cool with that. We can go with that. Let's go with that. All right. So, back to Miss Van Zandt and what she had to say on January 6th. And it is in all sorts of wondrous. I'm only going to read the part that I've highlighted. So at the beginning of the page it says, life will work for me when I realize I will continue feeling bad until my attitude improves. There is honestly a stratosphere of folk where you do not have to prove to them that you matter. You won't have to say a fucking word. And that those that continue to speak and communicate and maneuver around this space as if you don't matter, believe that. Stop being so in shock and surprise to know what you should know and has been shown and spotlighted for generations. Like the soil that you walk on, if you're within the American fabricated dream, you know that these folk are not about to hand over shit. They are not about to invite you to the table. They are not going to send you the memo that says, we are meeting to speak about this. We are meeting to hash out this. We are getting ready to produce this. So, what, in my opinion, we must do is understand that there are tables that are empty, tons of seats empty, because our own conversations need to be facilitated. And we honestly need not be speaking in terms of being the consumer or the receiver. These conversations need to be had as producers, initiators, innovators, so that when paths do cross and avenues do meet, that there's a portion of the conversation that solidifies the respectful reciprocity that is due. You can't be in a room full of producers and you're the only consumer and figure that they are going to handle you as a producer. So, be peace, be joy, be strength, be wisdom, be creative, be inspiration, be a delight, be a helping hand, be a smile, be a hug, be a success, be gentle, be kind, be hope, be faith, be truth, be trust, be honor, be forgiving, be patient, be calm, be encouragement, be discipline, be obedience, be fun, be freedom, be wealth, be respect, be fearless. Be a friend, be prayer, be love, be the miracle, be the possibility, be the opportunity, be the purpose, be the mission. Begin within and allow all the things you know how to be blossom into the truth of who you are. And that's the only portion on this page that I highlighted, mainly because it's just so poetic. It's so poetic and it's poetically just. And it goes very well with the intentions around this particular moment of Mercury's R&R because it's more than just a retrograde to me. And as I mentioned earlier, the list of the R&Rs will be um, part of the closing remarks for many of the sessions that I will be uploading into the public domain. I want to say until about September 1st. So even if um, you might have missed it on previous recordings, you can tap into uh, the latter portions of any recording that I upload, and it will be there. Um, just as a rule of recording for the next couple of weeks. So, that segues perfectly into the cards for this session. Now, remember, we're leading with Esprit de Corps. And it's amazing because um, it's amazing because many will figure that because you are not well read or because you do not have a 8 mile long uh, bibliography already established, that somehow you are not due your seat at the table because you do not speak their language or you are not one that can cite law or legislation or even the policies that are at play, that you somehow must not be adequate to comprehend. Always failing to realize that there are multi-generational gaps in this thing we like to call education. And anyone that look like me has a lineage of hundreds of years where it was outlawed that we read and write. So the notion that there was always slavery, of course there was always slavery. And truth be told, as far as I honestly feel, there probably will always be an element of slavery, even if it's through emotional manipulation. But here's two things that I honestly want to help it stay on the table within these conversations is the multi-generational gap in knowledge and opportunity and the significant effect of the timeline when human beings were literally bred as cattle for the upsweep of the human resource element inside of the American paradigm. So the magic that was mhm, I can't, no word is coming because it was such a remarkable use of energy inside the human resource industrialized complex that even when I study it, it leaves me in awe. It left me, it leaves me, it twines me up in the fascination of how folks were being birthed into the American narrative. The farms where those that were breeding material to produce the steeds and the bucks and the stallions in human form. And all that has been regenerated energetically as a result of that. And for us to not approach any of the conversations with this on the table honestly feels like the moment in the coffee shop with the dude that just don't give a fuck. So here are the cards. The Magician, the Ace of Pentacles, the Mother of Cups, which is also the Queen of Cups, the Two of Wands, the World, and Death. And like I said before, this set of cards was for a totally different piece of a lecture that is not due to roll out until September. Um, but the notion came upon me to allow it to serve for this session. So I'm going to roll with it in my obedience to understand my intuitive provocations and see where it leads us. So, signs, signals, and synchronizations. I pulled that from out of the Keynotes to Self series uh, because it fits. It fits in true form as I continue to um, ponder and learn to um, infuse the energies just beyond the threshold of eclipse season. And with my um, birth chart coordinates, really honing into the moon being in my first house, Pluto being in my first house, as well as hang on a second, as well as my Pluto being in Libra 2 degrees and my Chiron being in Aries 9 degrees. My North Node being in Aquarius 5 degrees, in conjunction with my fifth house, has quite a bit to do with it, as well as I continue to highlight that which I consider tribal treasures and my ability to authentically express myself, as well as my acceptance to the playful elements of my uh, my healing and maturity. So the first house, the house of self, is an interesting homeroom for those that have signed on to view life through the lens of the third dimension being considered Earth University, considered being um, the human experience is like the um, the attendance of college and university. So, with that being said, it is striking me remarkable to begin embracing this view of Saturn inside of this divine feminine force. Um, it brings a new spin to karmic debt. It brings a new spin to karmic reconciliation. It brings a new spin into the conversation around emotion and how we are in such bad shape because we wanted to continue inside this logic where there is no safe space for emotions to incubate and nurture, regenerate. So there's this thing called a coaching preparation form. I have been restructuring it for it to be a self coaching preparation form. How does one prepare to self coach itself? How does one get into the groove of being its teacher and its student? How does one prime its heart to accept the constructive feedback from its intuitive thoughts? What does it look like? What does it feel like when one is in primal reflection of its good, its bad, and its urban ugly? Because even though I'm in this complicated energy right now, I do not oppose those conversations that will bring healing and remedy. I don't. Because it's needed, and I know that it's needed. But we can't bypass third base. The reset is going to be compromised if we bypass third base. And I know everybody love these home runs. I know they do. They love it where where we can with the batter up and hit it, and everybody that's stuck on these bases can bring it on home. I get that. I get it. But when the swiftness of that happens, there will be some energetic residue left on the bases where I think we are at a time now where certain class and creed have been on top, not giving a fuck. And it is honestly time for reset. It's time for acknowledgement and acceptance of. And when that happens, like when dude sits at the coffee table in true interest, not necessarily saying that he has to automatically figure that you matter, because honestly, he just might not be the dude that's worthy of sitting across the coffee table. But the moment when he just honestly begins to listen and he can, with tact, say, you do matter, but you just don't matter to me. And I know that might sound harsh, but it's truthful for him to say that and then say, so I am not worthy of your presence. But I promise that if you go cross town and begin to build and organize and structure and find your way, that I am not going to somehow creep up lurking in the shadows to burn your shit down. I am no longer going to be housing all of your valuable artifacts inside of my people's museums. I am going to render to the doorstep the knowledge that would and that has propped up my privilege so that we may begin to balance the scales of language and the powers that define, so that when you do show up to the table, you know what's being spoken. You have ample amount of leverage to comprehend and contour inside of those spaces. And it even seems weird with me even saying it that way, because he would have to give a fuck in order for him to relinquish the goods that are originally yours. That knowledge to opportunity, the respectful reciprocity to the historical accounts of certain situations and circumstances. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so give me a minute. I have to continue to think about that. We still dealing with the self-coaching preparation. Um, but as I take a moment, just want you to ponder on this. Just ponder on how there are so many hidden figures, and overall, the contribution of certain knowledge and primal creativity through the divine feminine, um, is true to the unfolding of time and space when it did. But on so many levels, this quality of contribution was rendered in these nameless spaces in private But by the time it got to the public domain, by the time it hit the history books, somebody's of an entirely different creed took credit for it. So, this is what I mean when I say it's deeper than reparations. It's deeper than somebody writing a check. It's deeper. It's even deeper now that I think about it. It's even deeper than just the artifacts being dropped off at the front door. It's even deeper than having access to the private libraries and the firsthand accounts of the pioneers that it's complex. And I know it's going to take a lot more than just my ramblings to, I don't, I'm probably making it even more complex, huh? So my mind is everywhere. My feelings are everywhere, and I'm actually embracing it. I'm trying my best to just allow it to come out the way that it is. But I know most folks that will sit in front of a video, they are expecting polish and they're expecting certain things to come out with flawless effort. And being a Virgo moon, Virgo ascendant, I get it. Perfection, yeah, I'll wave a banner for perfection all day, which is one of the reasons why it's taken me so long to even do whatever it is that I'm going to do inside of the public domain, inside of the public spacing, because of how I personally critique stuff. But here we are, huh? So let's get into the cards. And then we're going to close it out with um, a piece from Dr. Gills. Dr. Gills. I keep doing that. In the first recording that in the first attempt to record this, I kept calling my uncle, my great uncle, it's my mom's uncle, Dr. Gilbert. That's got to mean something. Something's going on. I'll see. Okay. So, all right. Excuse me. Wild Unknown Tarot. That's where we are tapping in today. And I did produce a Coach Mad Hatter's horoscope for the month of July. And so I'm going to tap into that too. So as I unfold the energies that are in the cards in conjunction with the flow or the lack of the flow of this session, I want you to keep in mind of your lane. And it doesn't mean that you have to stay in this lane, because the magical part about it is there are multiple lanes for you to be in. Like, you honestly can switch lanes if you feel like you need to. You can honestly like shuffle. You can shuffle and you can shift, and you can shuffle down, you can shuffle up. All that we figured was tried and true wasn't, but it was being propped up that way. So we throwing out the rule book, we're throwing out the rundown, and we are mixing and mingling according to what feels instead of what deals. Like India Ari says, you'll know the truth by the way that it feels. And it's been proven time and time again that everybody ain't been honest. and many were specifically indebted to the agenda. So here's the deal. Mm. Tap into the energies of the Magician, the Ace of Pentacles, the Mother, the Queen of Cups, the Two of Wands, the World, and the Death card. So we have three major arcanas on the board, and the fact that it starts with the Magician helps me to see this time and space a little differently, um, and it gives me hope. Um, and let me just say, the series of lectures that will be rolling out uh, in the fall, at the brink of autumn, is all surrounding around the Pandora archetype. I'm going to tap into that. And at first, I was a bit intimidated to even tackle it from that angle, mainly because, as I mentioned before, I am more of the unofficial professor. Like, I'm the jailhouse lawyer. Because I am intuitively drawn and honestly interested in these things, I tap into them, and then I explore and walk with confidence down into these rabbit holes. Back in the summer of last year, I was on this thing about what if Alice was prepared to tumble down the rabbit hole? Like, she literally was equipped and ready for the magical, whimsical, unconventional things that she would stumble upon, and had her backpack ready to accumulate so that she could go back into her realm and study and produce these quilts of thought that would respectfully preserve and reserve all that were involved, and that no one got more or less. That even though what was being shared was not equal in quantity, but equal in quality, and that those that need more got more, those that need and could exist with less were okay with that, and understood that as the cycles and the seasons continue to unfold, that there would be time and time again where those that were or are receiving less, and according to supply and demand, it would ebb and flow in their favor, to the point where all was covered and none had to deal with destruction and destitution. That at the bare minimum, the American dream allowed for room and board and food and beverage. That's the four corners of existence if you really think about it. And that the dismantling of this greedy luxury was put in check. One of the most remarkable abuses of power is to have the reputation that America does, with being this alpha ultra powerful, busting out at the seams, resourceful, incredibly financially productive entity, and you have folks that are victimized by the elements because they have no shelter or no food. They are not granted the access to that which would make their biological framework manageable. And yet, you shun the notion of suicide. Like it's almost like I'm going to, I'm going to socially outcast you for wanting to piece out of your flesh, regardless of the fact that you are walking the streets, whether it is 80, 90 degrees outside, smoldering 100, or it is below zero and you freezing to the bone with it just seems so weird to me. And yet you have the plushness, the poshness to throw away full meals with no fucking regard. Like you don't even bat an eye to the percentage of food that gets thrown away. Like this honestly rules to the discard to towards discarded food and beverage. There's policy and codes with regards to home and shelter. So the magician, self-empowerment, action. The magician is a card of boundless, expansive energy, whereas many of the major arcana deal with stillness or aspects of the mind. This card is all about action, action, action. It's time to see yourself as the wildcat. Embrace his speed, grace, and abilities. Don't be afraid to begin. You have the power of all four elements within your reach. Now is the time to use them. The four elements at our reach is the power of the sword, the power of the pentacle, the power of the cup, the power of the wand. So we have, if blended properly, the moments where we can begin creating new blends of how we think, how we feel, how we see, how we act. So the next is the Ace of Pentacles, prosperous beginnings. And so, as I've said before, I am not endorsing a whole bunch of volatile retaliation. I am not. But I'm also not going to be dismissive of how tender the triggers are that could produce that. What I'm hoping is that all of those that live within the energy of feeling slighted and feeling like they must continue to sit across the coffee table trying to convince oh boy that you matter. Those folks, that archetypal characteristic where you have to be forcing folks to treat you with respect and fairness. that there is a shift in paradigm that says we are actually between what was and what's getting ready to be, and that we do have the power of the magician to reset this thing into what can honestly unfold as prosperous beginnings. In the center of even the giant redwood tree, a tiny seedling once stood. Such is the energy of the Ace of Pentacles. It's the seed that takes root, grounding you for the future. You're in the beginning phases of a prosperous venture. Stay grounded, go outside, and take time to appreciate nature. You may also find a windfall of wealth headed your way. And we have to get into the grooves that begin to value wealth physically and non physically. That which you know can transmute into wealth. And the breaking of certain generational curses has a lot to do with the tender triggers to step into volatile natures. I am a Capricorn sun, which means I am the warrior template. And if you want to take it a little further than that, I am the urban warrior, divine feminine template. And so I don't mind holding your hand. Don't have a problem with that because I know that that's healing as well. I do not lack the patience to unfold and unpack and explain and explore. But I also have the passion and the yielding of the sword. And I'm not afraid of my pen or my pencil. I've been back to the drawing board more times than I would love to admit. It's quite interesting, my life, my human experience. And it's not all for nothing, and neither is your experience, regardless of how volatile or how depressive or how oppressive you and yours find yourself or have found yourself. We honestly are inside of a pocket that is finally given how we feel its opportunity to mature and incubate and nurture and heal. So, tapping into the Mother of Cups, insightful psychic. Wait a minute, hang on just a second. Okay, we're gonna roll with it. So, the Queen of Cups, the Mother of Cups, insightful psychic. The Mother of Cups rivals the High Priestess with her natural psychic abilities. She's a gentle, tranquil woman whose insights bring healing to those around her. She strives for the midst her family, the arts, and music or beauty of any kind. Like a true swan, when the Mother of Cups is pushed, she becomes aggressive and defensive. She commonly sees herself as the victim when distressed in a situation. And stepping into the pocket when we are powering the ability to define. Because of this aggressive, dominating slant to logic minus emotion, as a society, the way we look at victimhood baffles me to no end. As if there are no victims. as well as the way we look at agitation or aggressiveness or defensiveness, as if things aren't unfolding that will thrust us into the moment where we must defend, to be part of moments where me defending myself is a greater violation than that upon which required me to defend in the first place. And it can get quite tricky when we have to deal in the tit for tat moments, when we have to um, begin to itemize trial and trauma, or triumph, actually. But as complicated as that is, I am hoping that those that are not bothered by the 1500 puzzle piece challenge just begin to spread it all out. And I am one to speak because puzzles intimidate me, especially all if it's that multi-pieced and they all small pieces, and the bigger picture is so complicated that and intricately intertwined that some pieces look the same and this could look like it could fit here. And so I am calling upon those that can metaphorically put the 1500 piece puzzle, or at least begin. Uh, One thing that I found very fascinating is uh, when those big pieces are, when those big puzzles, those multi-pieced puzzles of all of those pieces are approached by a group in groups, and they attempt to uh, piece it together in cycles where one or two will show up and they'll do what they can, and then another two or three will show up and they do what they can, and this goes on and on and on until the puzzle is pieced together. And then they all take their time with preserving it so that all may not only marvel in this completed puzzle, but those that contributed to piecing it together is allowed, one, the opportunity to piece together another one because they now have the vetted wisdom of the one that is now completed, but also um, given the opportunity to invite those that are within their circle a chance to contribute to the piecing together of the one um, that they are now moving towards. The Mother of Cups, in this day and age, as far as I'm concerned, has every right to stand in her aggressive, defensive nature, as well as honor her moments when her, her daughter, her mom's mom have been victims of the energy surrounding the society by which she lives in. And even with all of that, because she is the Queen of Cups, she has this regenerative nature of compassion and empathy. So instead of trying to lock her in the dungeon or trying to use shame as a weapon for all that she's been through and still didn't act like a lady, that inside of her tender conversations is the treasures of lifelong lessons. And that we tap into seeking that. And I believe that that's the reason why it's in the spread. Because as it being situated between the Ace of Pentacles and the next card, which is the Two of Wands, and let's just read it so that we can have proper clarity inside of this conversation. So the Two of Wands, determination and direction. With the Two of Wands, it's clear you're on your way to success. You've focused on a goal and have boldly painted all and have boldly pointed all effects in that direction. Since the Suite of Wands deals heavily with the mind, take the time to become aware of your thoughts, patterns. Take the time to become aware of your thought patterns, specifically toward yourself. What is the quality and tone of your thoughts, mostly positive or negative? How will you treat yourself on the journey to your highest dreams? With the Mother of Cups in between, situated in between these two cups, is situated in between these two cards, lets me know that there is a combining force of energy. There is a highly unique recipe of opportunities that's going to spill into the world. The world, wholeness, completion. The world is the final card in the journey of the major arcana. It signifies completion, harmony, and contentment. It's rare to experience this energy, as we are usually consumed by wanting, needing, and achieving. So when this card appears, contemplate for a moment the idea of being whole. Focus on an image on Focus on the image on the card. Close your eyes and envision this radiating energy inside you. What does it feel like? Where is it located? What blocks you from feeling a sense of wholeness each and every day of your life? And we know that there, right at this particular moment, are no shortages of energy. I think while we're inside of this Mercury R&R cycle, whilst being inside the portal of eclipse season for 2020, that we honestly understand the opportunities, the energetic opportunities that have come to assist. And that because we are in a we're participating with the energies. I can never get that word out. You know what I'm gonna do, right? Because I just want to say it. I want to hear it.
Participatory.
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 So, because we are in a participatory, which means involving or characterized by participation, because we are in a mode of primal, chaotic, divinely ordained cycles of participatory nature. The celestials honestly have come to this realm to just be present of how it all goes down. They are, and I'm speaking to them personified. They are not going to force themselves upon you, but your awareness and acknowledgement of their presence and you inviting them to participate, they're going to participate. So, with that said, we close out the cardboard with the death card, closure, transformation. No one loves the sight of the death card in a reading. We spend most of our lives denying death altogether. So when the card appears, it's easy to get frightened or to think it's bad. Don't let the drama distract you from the message. Don't let the drama distract you from the message. Don't let the drama distract you from the message. Something in your life needs to end. It needs closure. America, something in your fucking life needs to end. It honestly needs closure. This will happen voluntarily or involuntarily. Either way, like Cat Williams say, either way, we fucking. Either way, you will feel a positive transformation begin after the initial forms of suffering has passed. And it's incredible that I even go back to this because old boy sitting across the coffee table really could cease the suffering. He literally could put halt to the suffering if he just be honest and truthful. Now, that's not to say he's going to sit across the coffee table and get beat up on, and he knows his violations, so we don't need to hash that shit out no more. But just to relieve the need to constantly be told of that which should matter. So allow the suffering to cease. That's where we can begin at. We can begin inside of the tender transformation of understanding that the suffering needs to cease. The homelessness needs to cease. The producing and selling fake ass food that need to cease. The agendas of big pharma and these synthetic prop ups as medication that needs to cease. The agendas around public schooling and public housing, it needs to cease. So I'm gonna end it here. I'm gonna probably hold on to this span of cards because it is, um, in my feeling, going to serve um, in a multi-dynamic position as I move forward with certain lectures and the themes of certain conversations. So, consequently, I am happy, regardless of my tone. It was a struggle. I'm dealing in weighty energy, but I'm glad that I actually got in front of the camera to um, begin to process the initiation of this conversation. I think I will forevermore stand as the ambassador to the building the awareness around the feminine natures of Saturn. and how the grand pantheon of divine feminine force has come into this realm to bring remedy and healing, and that the more and more we make space for how we feel and understand that there's a grand spectrum of feelings and that they're all worthy of examination and exploration as well as expansion and just simple endowment and adoration, that um, we will take flight into that which came across from the, where are my cards, from the um, Real Justice League Oracle deck, which is, for the ones we pull today, Infinity and Destiny. Um, because the way I see it, our memories, that which we feel, is what transcends with us. And I know we put a lot of attention, time and attention and focus into the physical body. But the physical body belongs to this realm. You are not leaving without it. You honestly gotta shed this this dress of flesh when you transcend out of here. You can't take the go-kart with you. You can ride around while you're at the go-kart track, but you honestly gotta drop the car off when you leave. Yeah, so I get it. And it's nice to maneuver this realm in a body that's immaculate. It smells good and it looks good and it tastes good. I get it. But from the inside out is what it's all about. So I hope in my ramblings today, I am in true Coach Mad Hattery form. So I'm hoping that within this realm, within this time and space that we share inside this segment, that there were some things that latched on to your perspective, that maybe infused it into a different shift, or at least in the comprehension or the contemplation of another shift. And just begin to patch how you feel about something. Not to dismiss what you think about them, but become grounded with how magical it is when one embraces and affirms and accepts and respects how it honestly feels. With that said, thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure. It's been a moment, but it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining me, and I wish you well.